Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with more Hearts of Iron. Okay, we're going to continue this. We're doing a lot. Now, suggested / asked, why not invade down here at Calcutta or at Chittagong? Because I would cut off all of these forces up here from supply, and that sounds like a good idea. But a couple of things, and one I will readily admit is sort of what I'm used to doing. I mean, there is always that in any sort of calculation. What are you used to doing? But part of it is, if I were to come here, and I have seen what I think, I'm not going to say I know, but I've seen a large number of units come and go, and I don't think they've come down here. That they've come and stacked up here, and then they left, and then they came back. And some of that had to do with, I believe it had to do with some, revolts, rebel outbreaks at different parts of this now greater landmass all the way into Persia. So I think there's a bunch of more units somewhere around in here, particularly around in here. I'm dealing with a relatively small group of forces. There's a few more than just what's there, but and we're going to try to get these divisions, these infantry divisions, over as soon as we can and replace them with garrison type troops. So yeah, we're definitely looking at doing that. But what I'm sort of doing here is sort of the reverse of Russia. Russia, trades space and time, by falling back. And I mean, Stalin tried not to do that. His even more insane than Hitler's no retreat orders, because Stalin could have saved so much of his army. Now, what did Stalin do so much of his time in office, at least pre-World War II, was destroy his army, his armed forces. I think he feared it more than anything else. And this some other author brought up, and it seems to be true. Guerrillas and revolutionaries and those types of people seem to fear the military much more than the police, even like the secret police. Even though they combat and fight the secret police as their main sort of active enemy. What it looks like in good shape. Why does the AI think, oh yeah, it has revolt risk reduction or something, so we're going to put Liebstandart back here? Really? And not like, up here at the front. Okay, especially when they get into power, where they seem to embrace the secret police type peoples, whether those are secret police that, oh well, you're the new government, so I'm going to be your secret police instead of fighting you, or just simply forming your own secret police. Because I think and as the author pointed out, sort of know and understand them, but the army sort of seems like the combination of reactionary mindset and the big sort of power wielding, no matter what the secret police want to do, the army could always win against it, kind of thing. Because when the SS wandered around after the Hitler assassination, arresting German army officers, that only happened because the army allowed it to happen. I mean, you get 10, 20, 30 SS Soldiers, yeah, you know, showing up for Rommel at his home while he's on convalescent leave. Yeah, sure, you can take him. But all the other ones at their commands? If the army sort of said no, what are you going to do? Fight the army? And there were, especially in the very final days, multiple fights broke out between the army and the SS. And I'm just thinking about this here. And this is fairly early on. Listen to this story that I recently read. Okay. It is really, really interesting. And I guess there were two, and I think there's only one now. You probably all heard about the Lippersana, I'm butchering that. The Lippersana, I'm still sort of butchering it. Stallions, the Spanish riding school in Vienna. The you know what I'm talking about? The sort of the really nice horse stuff. Well, they're actually sort of something of a special breed of horses. You know, that's just sort of them. And I guess there was also another set that was in, because it was, you know, for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, that was in Budapest as well. And when, you know, the Nazis took over, they preserved them and you know, sort of didn't just turn them into, you know, draft animals for the war and all that stuff. But when the Americans were coming in to this area, I think the not the stallions, but the female horses had previously been moved to you know, fairly early on in the days of having Czechoslovakia and Austria and Germany, I think, like before the war really starts, were moved somewhere up into Czechoslovakia as you know, just sort of their pasture lands and whatnot. That part's nothing sort of nefarious or odd, but so the Russians are coming. They're still the Reich, and as you may watch the pictures or the maps of the end, this part of Czechia today was sort of ignored. The Russians were all pushing north of these mountains towards Berlin. The Americans were pushing sort of up towards Berlin and this way, and then up this way through from Italy. So this is some of the actually last areas of Nazi control. But while there still was the German Reich, and it was still fighting but this is in the very, very closing days. The a German intelligence officer sort of gets into the area. It's somewhere in here where these stallions were. You know, there's a German army veterinary officer in charge of them and whatnot, and they want to preserve them, and so they get it through the intelligence officer, contact the Americans, which are moving up into this way, and gets into talking to Patton's high command, you know, to Patton or some of his staff officers that get to Patton that want to save the horses. And they're still deep behind German lines at the time. But the Soviets are coming. And the Soviets, I think, butchered, you know, just machine gunned them, and or just the ones that they didn't do that were hurt in the fighting for Budapest were just taken over and used as draft horses, so that the bloodline is gone with that. So those, if I understand, and I could be wrong, but they sort of mentioned it, are basically over with. At least from that bloodline. I don't know if they've gotten horses from the Austrian ones that were preserved. And so the Russians were coming, and the Germans thought that they would be destroyed as part of Soviet vengeance. And, you know, contacted, can you come and save the horses? And this is at the time, like I say, still very far behind the line. So Patton basically says sure, because Patton's a horse rider. I think you actually sort of see in the Patton movie, he's actually like later writing them. Patton very much loved, cavalry officer, loved horses. And I think the German intelligence officer sort of understood some of that. And so, yeah, okay, but you got to get in. And the Germans had been reoccupying some of the, the old Czech fortifications. And they weren't going to let them through. Because those are different Germans than the Germans that were at the Riding Academy and whatnot. So, but you got to sort of get yourself through. And they sort of, a little bit of fighting and a little bit of avoiding, because a couple of the the guys that the emissaries help guide them in. So they get to the pasture area where these are being held, and go, and this is, I don't know, like 100 American troops or something. This is a small motorized group that comes into them and gets there, and yeah, okay, we'll turn them over to you, but we got to get them back. And there's a few hundred horses here, or more, or something. And there's a bunch of them. And so this one officer, I think his last name was Stewart or something, has to get all these horses back. So there's a bunch of prisoners of war that are there from various nations, including some, I think, Polish maybe, and I don't even know, maybe some Soviet prisoners of war, I'm not sure, that had been sort of detailed to help look after the horses. These sort of light slave labor, in the sense that they weren't asked, I don't think, but I don't think they were abused, because there were some Western prisoners of war, some British and whatnot, that had been there. Okay, well, we'll arm you up. Will you help us fight and get these horses out? Okay, sure. We still need some more people. I think, if I remember correctly, there were some Cossack types sort of in the area, and they go like, do you want to help us get the horses out before the Soviets come? And they go, yeah, we want to get away from the Soviets that are coming. And there's still not enough people, and they go to the Germans that had surrendered to them, the garrison for doing this that completely surrendered. If we were to give you your arms back, would you help us get these horses out? And about this time, because the reason they're getting all these troops recruited, I mean, these are just in a matter of hours, if not a day or two or something like that, is that they'd been given word that I think it was some Waffen-SS troops from Das Reich or something were coming to attack them, and probably kill the horses as well, just because the Nazis were killing, scorched earth, but definitely wanted to attack the American unit in there. Would you help fight off these Waffen-SS guys? Yes, okay. So, German garrison. So, I think they call it like Stuart's Foreign Legion, this whole group, and there's some photos of it that I saved to make an event one day. I don't normally make events for the collapse of Germany, because normally I've quit long before playing, but it would be an interesting event for an American event mod of conquering Germany, trying to save the horses, and just sort of a bit of the story, and you get the option to do that. And so that there are as sort of the Russians are approaching from one way, and they sort of see them off in the distance that they're coming, trying to block them from heading back towards the American line, or some Waffen-SS troops. So this mixed force, including the German army units, are fighting the Waffen-SS troops and having to defeat them to get these horses that they show some of the Americans riding some of the horses. Others are just in a crowd, or in a group in between trucks and whatnot that they're trying to drive and get all these people out. There were a bunch of the horses that were pregnant or had recently had foals, and so that they put them on the backs, in the back of trucks, and to drive them out, because they were in no real shape to do a fairly long march back to the American lines. So yeah, so this was a supposedly serious active, not just not very much the way it's described in the article that I read. It wasn't just the idea that the Waffen-SS showed up, and it took a few shots to show them, yeah, if you actually do shoot at us, we'll shoot back. There was supposedly real sort of squad, platoon, maybe company level, real sharp combat, but with the SS units, and that the German soldiers were fully engaged and helping it, because the Americans were like 20% of the force or something, or less. The 100 or so Americans that showed up, they had 500-600 or more others. A good number of prisoners of war, but some of them have been prisoners of war for a fairly long time, so they're not just they're not really combat ready type peoples. I mean, not that they weren't. Food was short, food was rationed, so, and if you're prisoners, your probably rations are a bit less, but it didn't seem like from the description, particularly like starvation people, but it just sort of what I mean. It just, things are short, and these aren't necessarily well-fed combat troops, well trained as combat unit. No, these are just a collection of prisoners that knew how to use weapons, that you had given weapons that they probably weren't used to, being German weapons, and stuff. So it's probably heavily, the Germans were heavily engaged just by some of the description unit, and then the some of the Cossack type units that were sort of fleeing west to get out from the vengeance of the Soviets. Were probably doing some of the heavier sort of fighting against the Waffen-SS. So that there were multiple cases of regular German army units in the final days of the Reich fighting Waffen-SS for various things. But there wasn't earlier on. But had that ever happened, oh man, the army's going to win. Because I don't care how good the Waffen-SS is. They're just a minuscule fraction of the army. And okay, if you happen to have a Waffen-SS division there, not just a company or two or something, yeah, those would be serious troops and everything else, but most of the stuff. So you get that sort of idea that, and a lot of the arrests weren't done by the Waffen-SS. They were done by the Allgemeine SS, the SD, the Ordnungspolizei and the other sorts of SS-controlled police units that, had rifles and light machine guns and whatnot, but they weren't proper combat units so much, as, at least not nearly to the army. So, sort of find that situation out. So I just believe there's a bunch more units that are moving around in here. Get back to the point. So I figure that if I come down here, I can secure a bunch of ports, get the supplies flowing in, and expand out, take the territory, control the territory, deny the resources, the ICs to the enemy, secure ports, in a way, having this as being their port, and they're getting supplies through here, because remember, India doesn't supply anything here. It's supplied from Britain, okay? So yes, if I take these two ports and fully cut it off from the rest of India, yeah, they run out of supplies. But if I say take out these ports and then, come up along the coast, which I'm sort of planning on doing, and taking down some of these other ports, they got a supply past me, and I've got commerce raiders out here that I'm hoping to use to go after their shipping. So that's sort of some of my thoughts on a story that I got pulled off on, that I hope. Okay, so let's see. We're bombing light carrier and a heavy cruiser, and we are battling the CAG, but we have fighter support. Very good, which is devastating the CAG from the light carrier. Autumn mud begins to clear. But I just thought that whole story was fascinating, the idea. And I had sort of wondered about that, quite honestly, a long time ago. Just because of the war. Not about that story, and I hadn't heard that story until very recently. but sort of wondered about some of the Lipizzan stallion types. That's it, Lipizzan. I think I was saying it wrong before. But I just sort of remember and try to say it normally. It works well. And of course I was advised to take out there as well, to limit the supply here. But we will. And here. Okay, Pacific Basin, they're still getting through, and they're getting us to some degree. Okay. Okay, fuselage aerodynamics have advanced, air systems, and I presume the other one will be wing aerodynamics. Yeah, okay, there we go, great. So at least for some time we're more than caught up on that, and we'll shift that over to there. Which will mean as soon as we hit 43, we'll start doing the single-engine fighter prototype research. Okay. I know I don't yet have garrisons for all of this, but I think we'll just risk the possibility of a counter invasion and go for more invasions. How are we doing here? Okay. And airborne unit training. And ammunition capacity for just the negatives there that I'm very willing to research this some more and get increased, air defense and increased soft attack. But what I want to make sure I do instead of pushing on this, and now obviously a lot of these other techs here that will then improved, we're well beyond the 41 theoretical air date. But I want to do all of the aircraft prototypes that increase range and increase speed, and air systems that increase speed. Get these things well pushed forward. All the different types of techs that do that. So then once I do get, like the next one of these that will do a total reduction of speed by 30 kilometers an hour. I've done enough other things that are pushed it far enough advanced that mitigate it. Sure, it will reduce the range and reduce the speed a little bit, but it will hopefully be a, everything else pushing way ahead already as well. It's just sort of my hope with some of that. First push out, or push beyond what the negative impact's going to be in over, because if I did that way back in 40 or 41, my aircraft wouldn't perform as well. And now that's just all a feeling I have. I can sort of readily say, because I don't get down in and look at the details of the stats, just how much X technology improves it, Y technology reduces it, and just where is the best balance. But so I'm sort of going with a gut level response, and as you well know, that means I could be very wrong, but it's, I think generally speaking, I'm correct on a lot of that. Okay, well, keep pushing, we want Manila. Okay, and we've taken out another destroyer flotilla out here. You're doing your job patrolling. These guys are doing their job of fire support for the invasion. And we're getting some CAG duties and... Okay, uprising. More military police that needs to be spread out. How are we doing for revolt risk? Well, that's part of the reason it's not so bad. Okay, yeah. Okay, I know we have some over here. These guys will come up here, pick up some of these military police, bring them down to here and other places, because once I remove some of these garrisons to go fight a bit more offensively, we're going to, because it's like all of these are spreading out their influence around, because we can see where we're getting far enough away from any influence. It's going back to red. And I far from don't have the luxury of garrisoning with my frontline units. Okay, create a supply convoy to Madras. That will help. And okay, we're going to, because we're at 107. We are taking a little bit of losses, so we'll do that, and we'll move one to the top just to make sure there's actually one in production. Now, I want to keep it over 100, and obviously we're over 100, but I just added another convoy, so I'm going to add some more, and some more, and more. Okay, I think these guys will be best used for okay, I'm thinking about another invasion somewhere over here. Deny him another port. Okay, airborne artillery upgrade. That is here. We're just going to keep bouncing back and forth. And what didn't get displayed? Okay, rolling artillery. I think that's here. And yes, rolling artillery barrages. Okay, monsoon starts to clear, snowfall increases, Battle of Duck Suit, good. Guadalcanal is ours. We have snatched possession of Guadalcanal from the Allies, sir. This will provide important base for us if we continue operations in the Solomons. Great. Attack USA, Japanese submarine shells an oil refinery in Santa Barbara, California. Okay. Those are definitely fairly early Americans for the period. They're getting some events based on that. And Japan did some of that, and like I've said before, it in no way affected the final outcome of the war. So you go, well, it's a waste. Well, yeah, but nothing they did was going to really affect the final outcome of the war. No, you don't need to go anywhere. You're going to pick these guys up, and we're going to go. Well, actually, you know, yeah, 'cause there's some tropical island garrisons and a regular garrison. You come up here and grab those, and then we'll come back and then take that, and then we'll see about going like after here. After we have that garrisoned. But it does shift resources, but they could have done so much more effectively had they just really planned an offensive in the early days. It would have meant them really having to shift stuff. Now, like I've said earlier, though I know the reason I keep repeating myself a lot of times, because I know people don't watch all the episodes, so I did a bunch of reading before starting this series on the Pacific War, because I just wanted to know more and sort of know more in a recent timeliness for this series. But for the Battle of Midway, you probably all know the basic story of they were breaking the Japanese codes. They were hearing what the Japanese were saying, but then they also don't know what they're saying, because it's like, we're moving everything to Teapot, and so we'll see you there on Groundhog Day. But it's not like whatever Groundhog Day, you know, really is, or it could be, say, we'll be there on D-Day. Well, when's D-Day, and where's Teapot? You know, so maybe you're making sense of, you know, you're breaking their encryption, maybe I should say, because that is a code, but they're using other words for things. They weren't saying Midway. They were saying, I forget, was it, I don't know, well, I forget the designation. It's, you know, the Midway movie and other things. And so, you know, they sent a secret, a message that they knew couldn't be intercepted, to send out a, in the clear broadcast that the desalinization plant had failed on Midway, to see if the Japanese reported that and referred to the island code by what they thought it was. And so, yeah, that's the attack, and it's going to happen at that island and around, you know, a particular time. Well, so now that you know where all the Japanese are going to be attacking, you move to sort of do what, you know, I've done here, in sort of the reverse of getting all your air power out there. Well, the Navy, who's in charge out here, wants to move all of the Army Air Corps' air power out to Midway to fight the battle. Well, the Army's going, oh, but we've got to defend Hawaii, but we've got to defend Hawaii. Yeah, but they're all going to, you know, to Midway. And so eventually Nimitz, and through whatever, gets his foot put down, and they'll get moved out to Midway, because there's a combination of reasons. Some of it is just sort of turf territory of different branches of service and things like that, and some of it was very real, and there was also a bunch of very real deployments that they were worried about, either follow-on attacks to Hawaii that were really serious, or attacks to, you know, the American mainland, and not freeing up assets to fight in other places, including some carrier raids and other things like that. Now, we know that although for the fighter air battle over Midway, because the Japanese did do airstrikes on it, the Army Air Corps was rather useful for it. But the Army Air Corps bombers hit nothing, that attacked the Japanese fleet. Now, of course, the Army Air Corps reports that, yeah, we sunk all these carriers, because they got some reports that aircraft sunk carriers, and the Navy hadn't reported that it was them, but just that the carriers had been sunk. So the Army Air Corps tells everybody that they did it. And the Army Air Corps thinks they did it because they fly over, they look through their bomb sites, they see bombs dropping, and they fly away, and they see explosions, in and around ships, because, big spouts of water coming up. So they think they've hit them. They don't. They truly believe they did, but through good intelligence capabilities at the time, but it wasn't released at the time, but the Army Air Corps pushes their stuff out. They know it was the Navy that, did all of the actual damage to the carriers or any other ships. So, and I'm not going to say the bomber attack was useless, because flying in there alters, air attack patterns. Where are the fighters? Are they up high, flying against bombers, or are they down low, flying against torpedo bombers, or and refueling and all the kind of stuff. So not that it didn't have an effect on the battle, it just didn't actually sink anything. So it probably wasn't so useful. I'm not saying it was useless, but it wasn't overly useful. But between Admiral King, he was the guy basically in charge of the Navy back in Washington, D.C., and very much in charge of running the Battle of the Atlantic. I mean, I haven't really read a good book on either King or, the Americas Battle of the Atlantic specifically, but he was, everything that I'm getting, was really actively running it, where he was just sort of getting the reports. And there was a big, huge fight going on. They're dealing with some of this, is that there was a Honolulu based intel group, the people that are dealing with the Japanese code, and they were all the stuff was also closed copied or whatever kind of thing to the intel group that was also trying to break it back in Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. wanted to shut down this intel, that, oh, well, we can deal with it, all the way back here, and just transmit the stuff back and forth, and we know what we're doing better, and we're better, and blah, blah, blah. No, they weren't, and it didn't work out nearly as well. But trying to manage what's going on in the Pacific, but Nimitz really was given a fairly free hand by King, but not entirely. And there were various military commands, naval, military, army, that was very worried, partially because, hey, if you're in charge of the defense of California, you're worried about the defense of California or the western coast or whatever. You're not worried about the battles out in the Pacific. Not that you don't want them to go well, not that you don't care, but that's not your worry. You see, well, what's threatening us? Well, we need fighters to protect America. We need bombers to protect America, because why did a good Navy friend of mine in the past, guns don't protect you, bulletproof vests protect you. He wasn't anti-gun. But, a gun isn't a protection. Bulletproof vest is a protection. I disagree. But, because I was trying, well, see, part of it is because he was a Navy guy, and he very much liked firearms and guns. It wasn't, like I want to say, wasn't an anti-gun sentiment. He really, don't think, had modern guns, but definitely got some flintlocks and things. But he saw them as an offensive weapon, but he didn't see it as a defensive. But where I was trained early on, actually by an Iranian, some of my early training was done by an Iranian, that how to use guns to protect you. And one of the things is always have, because we were focusing sort of on pistols, always have 3 pistols on you. Never less. You have your primary gun. That's the gun you use. That's the gun you always use. until you can't use it. And so then, you know, once you can't use it, you have your backup. And he, you know, most of the training wasn't hands-on. There was a little bit, but it was mostly conceptual and idea and going through it. And so he had made it out of Iran with his photo collection that was these. When I was dealing with was seeing it was on slides. This was in the olden days before they even had PowerPoint had ever been even the first version ever made. But it was sort of that kind of stuff going through. You know, showed a picture of a Smith & Wesson revolver with the chamber blown out that had happened to him. You know, a good American Smith & Wesson wasn't just some, you know, Taurus, Taurus, a Brazilian arms company, or some other Rossi or some other off-brand stuff. It was a good Smith & Wesson revolver, modern, that one of the chambers had blown out on it. Don't know if it was faulty ammunition. Just don't know if it was faulty ammunition or flaw in the chamber or something. But one of the chambers had blown out, and fortunately hadn't blown towards his hand or anything. I don't know if he was cut or wounded, but no, you know, serious damage. It didn't seem like he wasn't talking about it and had all of his fingers, that kind of thing. But blew out the chamber. So, you know. Sorry, your guns will, you know, and that was a traumatic failure, but will fail. Guns will fail. So, and can be just a jam or whatever. But I remember it was something open for the public, but it wasn't huge number of people. And my dad worked for the government, and one time when he and I, because he was on a government trip and took me along, we got to go through together a tour of the FBI headquarters in the J. Edgar Hoover building. That was 3 or 4 hours going through the FBI building or something like that. It was, you know, like a normal sort of, you know, with a tour guide going through and talking about the different stuff. And I mean, not real young. I mean, I was a teenager or something, but youngish teenager, I think, at the time. And they have a firing range within the building. And so one of the things was, and this is back in, you know, the day, we'll always be using revolvers. You know, this was like one of the head firearms instructors, managers, people, and, you know, sort of demonstrate, because automatics jam, and we use 357 Magnum revolvers because we want to, you know, hit hard, and we train well, and we do this stuff. And they did, you know, quick firing demonstration. Of course, none of us watching got anywhere near to like touching a loaded firearm or something like that. But, you know, it was this, and they were sort of talking about the FBI philosophy of handguns. Now, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, they have a big shootout in Florida between some FBI agents and some other bad guys. And the FBI agents lost. I think they died or seriously wounded or whatever, because they just had 357 Magnum revolvers, and the bad guys had automatic pistol, you know, not semi-auto pistols, not full auto, but they were just, you know, overwhelmed by the firepower of 13 or 20 round magazines. Kept changing, and there were several bad guys, and there were just like a couple FBI officers, and they just got completely outgunned, fought. And so that is when you get the changeover, and you get the creation of, 10 millimeter ammo, because we want 357 power in a automatic, because we had 357 power before, and we want it in an automatic. So we're going to have that in an automatic. The Bren 10, great handgun. Probably most famously used as, Sonny Crockett's. I know all these handgun things because I worked in the firearm industry. Sonny Crockett's handgun in the Miami Vice original series was a Bren 10. Rather collectible gun if you can get your hands on one today. There's only one problem with a like the 10 millimeter handgun. It's like a 357. Oh my, yeah, and it's too much for 80 to 90% of even FBI officers. 80 to 90% of handgun shooters, it's too much of a gun. Not that you can't shoot it, and not that I couldn't shoot it. My wrists aren't weak, but spent enough time around powerlifters that compared to them, my wrists are weak. But if you're a powerlifter versus me, I'm a weakling compared to them. But I think in dealing with a lot of normal, average gun shooters, I'm normal. I'm in the top half. But I've never shot a Bren 10. I've shot some 10 millimeters. I can shoot them just fine. But that's not combat shooting them. That's not, wanting to shoot fast, boom, 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 and keep them on target, not have to deal with the recoil, and not have to handle all of that, combat, fast shooting, engagement in, stressful environment. It's, fine, just at the range, you're taking your time, you're shooting, it's fine. It's a powerful handgun. It's as powerful as a 357. But a 357 is a fairly powerful handgun. And it's different when you're trying to do rapid shooting, not just out of 6 rounds out of a single revolver, but you're trying to dump ammo onto the target, but on target, not just spray and pray. It's too much recoil for most people. And most FBI officers aren't gunfighters. Their job isn't gunfighting. Their job is to be a what's it called? An FBI officer, which is someone who goes out and solves crimes, figures stuff out. It isn't, they're not like I'm sure the FBI has some SWAT teams. Those are FBI gunfighters. Those are guys that train all the time, shoot all the time, do this stuff. One guy who, sort of famously did that, if you read his book, was G. Gordon Liddy, even though he was in the Treasury Department, not the FBI. And he really, and if you looked at in his early days when he was doing this stuff in his book, he described his gun shooting routine. He shot daily at the range for a while, and really, really, really trained. Because in a time in my life, I did shoot at least 5 days a week, 50 rounds a day. Most of the time I got in a 6th day with 200 rounds. So I can't shoot as good as I used to because I don't keep that up. But if you shoot and train 50 rounds a day every day, or 5 days a week, go to the range as just part of your daily thing. Show up at the range, you shoot your 50 rounds, you go home. At least twice a week. So you hear all these people, after every shooting you got to clean your gun. Well, if you're shooting your gun every day and you're using non-corrosive ammunition, you don't have to clean your gun every day. But most people don't shoot. They shoot like once a month or something. And if you're shooting once a month, clean your gun after shooting it. But if you're shooting your gun every day, all the time, it's fine not to do that. And trust me, I was cleaning my guns easily twice a week. I was doing it. And so I shot a lot. So if you're taking that time, but most FBI officers don't daily go shoot 50 rounds. If you're a gunfighter, if you're the SWAT team and you're a full-time SWAT team and not like a lot of sheriff's departments whose SWAT team is a part-time gig, their real job is to write speeding tickets. But when they got their SWAT gear in the trunk of their police car, and when there's a call for it, they all jump in their cars and go to the incident. Those people train more than the regular police officers, but they're not a full-time. But if you have a full-time gunfighting crew, well then of course you can do it. And then of course a Bren 10 works well. I don't know what the FBI is currently using, but they no longer use the 10 millimeter because it's too much like the 357. So, how did we get FBI, Bren 10, revolver, gunfight? I'm trying to work my way back because there was some points to this before I went down. I hope they were interesting stories. Carry 3 guns. Guns are defensive. So, you always have a primary gun. You always have a backup gun. Because your primary gun doesn't always work. You need a 3rd gun. Because shit happens. And you just need any sort of gun. Could be a 25 caliber automatic, could be a 22 caliber automatic, though I wouldn't recommend a 22 caliber automatic. Rimfires and automatics don't go together for a practical defense weapon. I mean, I own some just because I'm a gun collector, but I wouldn't choose to use that. 25 caliber, very underpowered, but you'll get my point in a minute. Or like a little 22 caliber revolver. The North American Arms ones are sort of famous for that, which was actually sort of what was suggested, is that you want a gun, any sort of gun, to make gun noises, basically. And yes, you can actually point it at a person and hope to do damage to them. But the idea is after everything else has failed, after whatever, you shot up your ammo, you can still go pop, shoot around. And so the bad guys know that over there behind in the other room or wherever it is, there's still somebody there with a gun. So that is defensive gun use. Simply the idea that your opposition is armed is defensive gun use. It is being defensive with a gun. It's sort of like, oh, he's got a shotgun in his hand. Maybe not even pointed at anybody. The other people are less likely to mess with you. So if you are out in the countryside and you see some people, you know, like you're on a ranch and you see some people off in the distance, and either they're coming over to say hi or you decide to go over to say hi to them because you've never seen them before, because you don't, you know, I mean, they're 500 yards away and they don't look like anybody you recognize, and you amble over to them carrying a gun. And I've been in that situation, ambling over carrying a gun just because I carried a gun. They're very nice, polite, and kind, and you're not even threatening, and you're just doing whatnot, and it's all, you know, happy, nice, and they go on their way, and you keep doing what you're doing, because you're just standing there talking to them, carrying a gun. And it wasn't, you know, I'm thinking several incidences out on the ranch that different people that met, and everybody was super friendly, and they probably would have been friendly even without that. And the guns were just because I was a kid wandering around with a 22 caliber rifle, literally a kid wandering around with a 22 caliber rifle, shooting at whatever I felt like. But I was trained in safety things. But hey, here's some people, and not that they shouldn't have been there, and I was definitely where I should be. And again, not that they were, it wasn't inappropriate for them to be there, but who are these people? You know, I'm going to go over and say hi to them just because I'm sort of shooting in the area and I want to sort of, you know, not to know where they are, so I don't shoot, you know, towards even, you know, even in the just the general direction, meaning I want to shoot in 180 degrees in the other direction than they are, but just who they are and what they're going to be out there in the countryside. And yeah, I'm just, you know, just because you don't leave your gun, you just carry your 22 caliber rifle. So yeah. You know, you're meeting somebody out in the loneliness. Guns are defensive, and whether they had a gun or not, I don't know. But it didn't matter, and I definitely didn't know when I was starting to. They were too far away to know. You know, so just like everybody has guns, everybody's nice and polite, and it's good defensive capability. Okay, so bombers can be defensive because they can bomb submarines. This is where we started off on this path. And so the guys that are responsible for defending this stuff, they're trying to put this into a good state of defense because this is their responsibility. Their responsibility isn't here. Take that same Army general or that same Navy admiral and give him a command down here. He's going to then all be worried about this because this is now his responsibility. Right. Now we know that the U.S., or I mean that Japan was never had any serious attacks against the U.S. here. And I don't mean like invasion plans. I mean a serious plans of attack. They never brought a carrier group anywhere near here to do airstrikes on aircraft factories and then go away. I mean, there wasn't even any of that kind of thing. But had they done that, had they got that ready, and because I'm thinking in the early days, I'm not thinking 43, 44, something like that. There probably would have been enough serious defenders as well as training aircraft, you know, training up fighter squadrons and whatnot. Very well might have been able to respond and slaughter the attack. But had they come in with a serious, you know, either a serious full-size carrier or some carrier group of 2 or 3 carriers, it could be smaller ones, and really try to do a serious bombing attack on, you know, try to know from intelligence roughly where the aircraft factories are here, and really try to, you know, mess that up, not just kill people, but mess that up. Had they made one good strike on that, that would have sent so much panic through the, shall we say, government nervous system, you know, the nerve system of America, both military and civil, that would have really made America reacting to what's going on. They would have been, oh hell, the Japanese were actually able to get carriers past the, you know, Hawaiian defense line, and they could be coming back at any moment with more, and they could be doing, you know, a big super invasion of San Francisco and do, you know, man in the high castle at any moment. They might be, you know, millions of Japanese soldiers might be landing at any moment. People in Congress would be screaming, you know, and other sorts of things. So that would have really affected how America fought the Pacific War. Really would have put them on the defensive bonus, because we know about the amounts of levels of defensive setups in here. And they talk about how in the wake of Pearl Harbor, in the sort of somewhat immediate wake of Pearl Harbor, in the early days when Nimitz gets here, because sort of Nimitz is put in charge. He's sort of told that, you know, they've done some press conferences that some battleships were damaged, and maybe even they admitted that one was sunk, just because they know the Japanese knew some of this stuff. They admitted some of that in the press conference. And Nimitz is put in charge. I forget, Kimmel, I believe, was the admiral out here at the time. He's put in charge, and within like 24 or 48 hours, he's on a train going across America. He decides not to fly. He ends up flying, of course, in the plan from you know, the mainland America to Hawaii. So it wasn't a fear of flying or anything. It was just more of a, I'm not ready to be in Hawaii commanding this just yet. I've got to get prepared. So they had one, you know, lieutenant or captain or somebody, or lieutenant commander, or I forget what, who was one of the staff officers, rode with him on the train, you know, for a couple of days or whatever, to like Chicago or someplace like that. You know, it was, you know, going on, and it was, you know, with a bunch of papers and everything else that he hadn't seen, you know, the sort of reports, you know, photographs and reports of what really happened. So he's not been given any of this information, even though he's been put in charge, until he's getting on the train and going and gets a night's sleep. And I think you drank a glass of whiskey every night before going to sleep. Nimitz did, or something. Wasn't you know, a Churchillian heavy drinker, but just that kind of thing. And so he's reading as he's going across America, first getting briefed by this guy, but then continues on his own on the trains to, was it Los Angeles or San Francisco? I think it was Los Angeles. And so he's reading up on this and thinking about, you know, getting all the briefings and realizing that basically the Navy's gone. The Navy's just gone. So reduces command problems. Yeah, he still has the carriers, but and he is a carrier advocate, but he knows the Navy's just gone. It's been sunk. And so, you know, he's getting out there. So very shortly after he's getting out here, you know, in this, you know, because he was supposed to take off on Christmas Day. Maybe it's even San Diego. Could it have been? Well, it was Los Angeles, San Diego, or something. Maybe it was that. Supposed to be going off on Christmas Day or day right around there. So this is telling you when this is all going on. And, you know, because it happens December 7th. Christmas Day, there's some sort of delay or whatever. So then the day after or something, they end up going. Sorry, I'm getting some of these details wrong. But gets out to Hawaii. And very quickly after that, and even maybe some of the stuff before it, they've been building a new command headquarters for the Pacific Fleet. And this is a bunker that is designed to be bomb-proof, you know, from normal carrier bombs, not like some super Hitler bunker that you could drop, you know, B-17 load after B-17 load bomb on it. No, it's just sort of like the idea, if you're coming in with a carrier airstrike, you just can't blow it all up. So the files, you know, the paper filing, you know, the stuff that runs the Navy won't be burnt up and destroyed. The command staff won't be killed. There's even outside and around it more, you know, bomb shelter stuff, because not all of the buildings that are part of the complex, you know, are bunkers. You know, there's just regular, cheap, fast built, you know, wooden buildings. You know, I mean, some of them very cheap, very fast, just because we need a building for this today. We don't need it tomorrow, we need it today, so build it now, kind of stuff. So there's a lot of this, you know, Navy complex kind of stuff going on. And so, you know, there's, you know, air raid shelters and all this stuff. But, you know, so they build this bunker, but it also is built to defend against a ground attack. And part of what they're thinking is they mention this stuff, it isn't necessarily built to be like this here, defending against a Japanese invasion. It's being built to defend against a Japanese commando attack. You know, maybe sort of a kamikaze kind of thing. That's, you know, paratroopers drop in or land, you know, or, you know, land to come be a submarine and move towards, you know, the headquarters base, and they've got this bunker thing with guards outside of it that will, you know, engage in firefights to defend, you know, the admiral and his staff. So they're building these bunker complexes to do this stuff because they're that worried about what are the Japanese going to do. That's how worried about things that's going on. And that's just from, you know, sort of what did happen. So had they done, you know, more, we would have had huge amounts of resources and efforts put in, much more than there were. And also do remember, they were adding, during the war, adding to the U.S. coastal defenses of the big battleship guns mounted in, you know, permanent coastal defenses during the war. So they were still doing that already, but they would have been doing it even more, and maybe taking guns that were actually slated for ships to, well, no, we're going to put them on, you know, coastal artillery defense situations, you know, stuff that would mess the war up. Okay, so we're moving from Pacific Steamroller to Pacific Conqueror. Basically, except for supply throughput, 1% better. Thanks, good. 5 darn merchant cruisers. Okay, ports are waiting for you. Yes, launch them. We want those. Tension Shuden glider force. Yes, we'll take that. Was that a ground unit or air unit? I think that is an air unit. Air units. Oh, wow. Well, okay, they're in Tokyo. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. If you know anything about the gliders in this game, they are slow, very slow, and rather short-ranged. But if you remember when we were doing the para jumps down here, I was doing one division at a time, because for one full proper paratroop division, it took all 7 of those aircraft that are currently there to be able to land it, so I couldn't. And I was sort of worried about adding, well, I think there is like one motorcycle unit that's there that is added as a reconnaissance. I was worried about adding some more elements, including these this special armor stuff, even though it has the amphibious symbol on it, is also paradroppable. But they take a lot of space. So like if you're like me playing as Germany, you've got a lot of these heavy transport planes. You just got to take them off supply transport duty, and you can easily drop the you know, the heavier units. But they don't have and so it's no real problem. But here with what I have, it has been a problem. Okay, 5 destroyers taken out. How are we doing for? Good shape. Good shape. Okay. Major defeat here, which is just a defeating of a division. Okay. And again, because we're seeing some of this, and part of this I will, and we totally need to go continue to push, is that we're fighting into, you know, harsh terrains. But even when, well, we're facing Bhutanese and other sorts of, you know, some Gurkhas, those are pretty elite, yeah. They're able to take out this pretty elite mountain division within a veteran HQ that it was in the jungle, so that should be fairly decent defensive and fairly decent with between mountain infantry, special light infantry, pack artillery, armored cars to give it some sort of hardness. That was in light vehicles. It was meant to be a motorized, you know, semi-motorized, whatever, mountain division. And here these guys are maybe... So I'm sort of worried about some of these units. So that's why I didn't want to start trying to tangle with them. In here, I guess, would be a reasonably... But then they still have this port, so I'd have to take that port. Chittagong, and maybe fight in the jungles. And I just... Okay, and I know I've talked a lot on this episode. Shaping the battlefield is a very important thing. And I've learned sort of some of this from Sun Tzu and other things. No, I didn't meet him. I read his book. Shaping the battlefield is a really important thing. So, if you have, you know, here's a proper armored division. Really sort of proper armored division. Because it has medium tanks, and these are better than the Japanese ones because they're, you know, they've gone through proper all the different upgrades, you know, so these are pretty decent tanks here, so they're doing fine. Now these are obviously light armor, but we've got some more, and they need to keep moving. These units fighting in this terrain are going to do really well, okay? Where if you get a Gurkha unit, or they're mountain and probably also good jungle fighters, I presume, I haven't looked at all the stats, but you get some of these colonial light infantry and colonial cavalry and other things. You put them in a jungle where they're sort of good, and they have any sort of anti-tank unit attached or whatever, they can really start messing me up. I'm not going to say they're going to defeat me necessarily, but they might. And, you know, they might win. And yes, very much, this is pretty decent. If I get ashore and could get these things here and not have to attack across the river, you know, get to, you know, here before, or, you know, defend along that river line, oh, I could maybe do really well. But here I know I'm going to do well because I'm facing almost zero opposition. And even if they get, they're not going to be able to hold all this river line. They're just, because I know from playing as Germany, they're not. And so I can get around their flanks with some units and push and get them off any rivers when I have a large enough area. Because notice when I was pushing across this river here, I was having serious problems and having units shatter. And I still have at least 2 divisions back up in northern China that I got to get back here that are actually in good shape now. These guys, you know, armored cars, light vehicles, that shattered, I think, mostly along this river line here. But once I got across that river line and been using these units to push up along this, I've been doing fairly well. And so that's sort of all of my various philosophical thoughts on why not to confront these guys directly. Okay, they're attacking there. So yeah, I'm not to say the you know, land in Calcutta and cut them off and get their, you know, cut their supplies off, and somehow maybe also try to land there too, just to get that, you know, just hold that port and get Calcutta here and cut all that off. Yeah, that's not a bad plan. That is a good plan. But in a way, what I'm sort of really more hoping that they'll do is, like I say, is come down here. But I'm also sort of hoping not just that they're defeated here, but they decide to give up the battle, move this way, which will then free up my pursuing force. And so I'll catch them here between these guys and more reinforcements and these guys, and we'll have this battle out here instead of trying to have the battle here and here. That just, you know, I mean, oh, and I was asked, and I know I could to somehow do this, and I do have some saves, like from before this, but big battle, or if there's going to be another big naval battle, if I could save it beforehand, fight the naval battle, and then reload it in before that, go to the save, and then tag switch, and then sort of watch the naval battle from the other side, throw that away, you know, don't continue to play it on from that. And that would be a cool way to do it, and so that the other side, you can see what the other side's doing a little better maybe whether it's a long or short episode, I don't know, it depends on how much I talk, I know that. But what I am sort of worried about is, from a gameplay perspective, yeah, okay, and yeah, once we sort of know, and whatever the second version of the battle happens to be doesn't matter, because tag switching destroys everything, and you don't want to keep playing from that. It doesn't, if you have a save from before, it doesn't destroy that save, but anything after that tag switch to any other country destroys your game. Just remember that. Don't ever tag switch and then think you're going to keep playing. So if you want to fix an ally, tag switching over and going back, no, that's going to destroy your game. If you just want to like go, oh, well, looks like the Italians are doing some good, getting back some territory, good. But lots of German reaction to it, which is not helping things other places, to the Soviet invasion down here. But if you just sort of want to tag switch to see something, and then you're not saving it after that, that's fine. But don't do it in your middle of your game, even to help an ally out, and think you can go on. It destroys your game. And you go, well, you can still play. Yeah, but there's things that you won't notice, and you may never notice, but that are broken. And so you never want to do that. But I'm just sort of worried because, you know, even if I just get a quick glance of what the army is doing here, oh, that would change my because if I realize, oh, it's just these guys here, then yeah, I might, you know, invade here. So sort of too much knowledge kind of thing that I don't necessarily want, because I'm having fun playing this, and I'm, you know, if I've got, you know, if I can zoom in and zoom out and get what is telling, you know, intel on the enemy, I'll take that, because that is presumably through the various, you know, whether it's radars or other sorts of means. Just look at that. We don't know how many, but, well, we can see. Well, the stack can be bigger than 3, but there's at least 3 divisions there. And there is a medium armored brigade. There's a light armored brigade, and there's a light armored battalion there. So those are probably 3 motorized divisions that are sitting there facing off against this guy and not fighting the Germans. So we sort of know that, and we know we're doing well, because that guy is cheap compared to that, and the core HQ that's above it, and other sorts of things. So we're doing a good job. Now down here, well, I don't know what the garrison here is like, and the mere fact that there's nobody there doesn't mean that they're not sending somebody, you know, from here or wherever else that might be heading down to face off against these guys. But we're generally doing a good job distracting Soviet units for cheap. And again, these guys are super cheap. And we're sitting across from... even that's more effective than my militia units. So yeah, so... okay, talked about a lot. Episode gone on too long. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. Hope it was enjoyable. Hopefully some interesting stories that were reasonably coherent. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.